said that reading makes you more empathetic. It's a way to escape your own life. It can take you to faraway lands or put you into other people's shoes. In fact, it could keep your brain healthy, reduce stress, and help you sleep better. Or it can even inspire you. In today's show, we're going to be talking to Mark Leslie about his book, Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. Don't go away. We will be right back. If you have just joined us, then welcome to Books with Bridgetti. I am your host, Bridgetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and our stream today is made possible by StreamYard and Be Live Media. A special warm welcome to you, our audience, whether you are watching us over on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, or over on Amazon Live, then a warm welcome. Do note that I am keeping an eye on the comments, so I am watching my phone. So if you do comment, if you say hello, let us know. And good morning to Tish. Welcome to the show. So glad that you're able to join us. I've been interviewing authors for about 3.5 years. And if you are watching us over on Amazon and you go to the storefront, you'll see a whole bunch of recommendations of all the authors that I've interviewed over the last, 3.5 and a bit years. And you'll see there's a bunch of books here, and the lighting's always terrible when I try and do that. But there's a whole bunch of books there. And the author today, Mark Leslie, his book is in the carousel specifically. So do have a look at that as well. So there's a whole bunch of books that you can choose from my storefront over on Amazon. But before I introduce Mark, I'm also all about helping people level up. And who isn't online today? Everyone is online. So to help me look my best, and what I would like to recommend to you is the Logitech Brio camera. Of course, you can go for anything fancier, but the Logitech Brio has got that right light trademarked technology, which helps it to adapt to whatever lighting conditions you've got. So that's fantastic. And I use the Samsung USB condenser microphone. Fun fact, Samsung was actually the first company to introduce the USB condenser microphone. And if you don't want to have a huge microphone, I highly recommend that you have a look at the Rode lavalier lapel mic, because that's also going to help you level up your audio. People will forgive a somewhat bad video, but they won't forgive you for bad audio. So do ensure that if you are online, that you invest in good audio. And it also comes with one of these smart little thingies that they call a windshield. So if you're out and about, that'll do a bit of noise cancelling for you. So that's my quick tip before I bring Mark on screen. So for those of you who don't know Mark Leslie, we're going to be talking about his latest book, Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. He's the author of more than, listen to this, he's the author of more than 30 books. And that includes fiction, thrillers, paranormal, nonfiction explorations, and he's also edited a whole bunch of anthologies. But who better to talk about his work than Mark himself? So let's welcome Mark to the show, shall we?
Hey, Bridgetti, thanks for having me on.
Mark, welcome to the show. Welcome. It's, in the 3.5 years, I have very rarely interviewed people who's written as many books as you have. How do you do that?
I've been at it since 1992. Maybe that's it. No, I've been writing since I was 15 years old, and so it's just been a lot of work over the years. I am not what you would call a fast writer, but I am a very persistent writer who just doesn't give up.
Wow. So what started your love affair with writing? Was it your parents, a teacher? You just developed a
Um,
natural knack for it?
You know what? My mom, so she worked at the mini mart in a small town in mid northern Ontario where I grew up, and every Tuesday she would bring home comic books for me, and it started off with it was Spider Man. I fell in love with the Spider Man comics, especially the serialization of the monthly continuing stories, and I read comic books when I was young, and then going to the library was just the best experience for me. And I just read everything I could get my hands on. So I was a voracious reader my entire life, and of course fell in love with story. And I wanted to tell my own stories. I was inspired by the stories I was reading, and I was thinking, well, what if this happened instead? And so that just sparked my creativity, and I started, when I was a kid, I would just love when we get assignments at school that would ask us to do creative writing. I just took those to town and had a really good time with them, and realized that storytelling was definitely in my blood.
So when did you actually publish your first book then? How long did it take you to get to that point?
Well, I'll go back a little bit before the first book came out, because I started off with short fiction, trying to sell short stories to magazines and things like that. And I got my first rejection when I was 15 years old. Now, it was when I was 19 years old, 1990. No, I was more than 19. I must have been 21. I can't do the math well, but it was 1992 when my very first short story was published. And then my very first book was not published until 2004. And what that book was it was a collection of my previously published short stories. So it was a long time. So 2004 was when the first book came out. And then I slowly ramped up over the years in terms of production.
Wow, that's amazing. And how long did it take you to develop the art of storytelling to the point where you felt that you had mastered the art? Because that is a process in itself.
I still haven't mastered the art. I will continue for the rest of my life working on getting better at the craft. Now, getting to a point where it was good enough for people to accept, for editors to accept. So again, I cut my chops in the slush piles, where I would send the manuscripts off and send the stories off and get rejections and then get feedback from editors, and then every once in a while get an acceptance, which meant, yay, this story made it. It was good enough. Or what I learned was the story may have been good, but it might have been for the wrong editor at the wrong time, right? So part of it was timing as well. And it's the same thing with readers. This may be a story that some readers think is the best thing ever, and other people go, eh. So I learned that even when a book is published or when it's out there, there are going to be some people that love it and some people that don't. Like, for example, because I tend to write darker stories, I tend to write, paranormal exploits of werewolves and ghosts and strange things like that. That, if somebody's into, let's say, sweet romance, that's not their cup of tea. They're not going to enjoy the violence and the macabre things that happen in those books. So for them, that's not going to be a good book. For someone else, though, hopefully the right reader, it's going to be a good book. So yeah, it's a lifelong process, and every single story I write, every single book I write, I learn something new. with the different editors that I work with, whether they're the editors assigned to me by a traditional publisher or the freelance editors that I hire when I'm publishing them. I'm always learning and picking up on new things where an editor will point something out and then I go, aha, okay, didn't realize I did that. And then I try to consciously adjust and change. But I think the other thing that's really important is reading a lot, because when you read a lot, or even when I watch television shows, just understanding character and dialogue and story and plot arcs and all of those things, the more that you absorb about those things, I think the better you can become, because you can sit there and enjoy it, but then you can also not critique it, but maybe learn from the techniques that you're watching. It's the same thing. I did a lot of theater when I was in university. And so I can't go to a theater now because I did lighting design. I did a lot of that. I can't go to a theater now without sitting there before the show starts and looking to see where they've hung the lights, because I'm anticipating what they're going to do and how they're going to pull, especially if it's a play I'm familiar with. I want to see, well, how are they going to pull this off? How are they going to pull off this particular technique the way I did it, maybe? And that's part of the joy, I think, of when you're a writer is you can't just sit back and enjoy reading or watching something. You're constantly analyzing and learning from it.
So just listening to you, you don't use the same editors. You have a variety of editors, and I'm also hearing that you don't stick to one method of publishing. So if you tried
Yeah.
sort of the big five, you've tried self-publishing, you've tried indie, you've
Yeah. Well, I have never published with the big five. The largest publisher I've worked with is Dundurn, Canada's largest independent publisher. And I've done a series of books with them, and I've worked with various other smaller press publishers, which is great, because when you work with a smaller publisher, you get a lot more interactivity and you get a lot more say rather than some committee in New York that's making all the decisions. And then I've also self-published, and so what I find, each book or each project or series or whatever, it almost feels like, depending on how I want to sell it, and I'll kind of break it down this way. If I think that this book is a print sale book, that it's going to sell more in print than it's going to sell in ebook, that's something I want to.
how do you determine that?
Okay, so there are a lot of books. So the ebook market, what took off in the ebook market was what you would think of as mass market fiction, pulp fiction, for lack of a better term, because this is just readers want to consume it really fast. They don't care what format it's in. They just want to enjoy the story. And so that goes for a lot of genre fiction, right? It goes for science fiction, it goes for fantasy, it goes for westerns, it goes for romance, it goes for all of those, where the reader may read a book or two a day, and they can load it onto their Kindle or Kobo or Nook or Apple, whatever the platform they're reading on, and they don't care to own a physical copy of the book. With some of my books, especially the nonfiction true ghost story books, those are souvenirs. They're typically haunted hospitals or creepy capital or spooky Sudbury. A lot of them are location based, and so people visit a city and want to learn in creepy capital, they want to learn about the ghosts of Ottawa, Canada's capital city, and so they go on a ghost tour. And then they go, oh my goodness, in the gift shop, there's a copy of Creepy Capital through a traditional publisher that is on the shelves at the local shops. It's on the shelves at the independent bookstores, at the chain bookstores. It's even in places like Costco or wholesalers. And so working with a traditional publisher can get my book out in that realm where people want to take the physical copy home and have it. Whereas potentially with a novel, with my Canadian Werewolf series, for example, I sell a lot more ebooks because people just want to enjoy the story. They don't necessarily want to own a copy. Now, that being said, I do make them available in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audiobook so that people can enjoy them however they want to, because it's not up to me to decide that. It's up to the reader. But I do sell more ebooks than anything, because I think a lot of my readers will just want to enjoy the story and then go on to read something else, whether it's one of my other books or many of the other thousands of books that are published every month that are amazing, and they're going to enjoy reading.
how do you decide whether or not you want to make your book available in audio? And do you do your own audio or do you farm that
I've
out?
yeah, I've only done my own audio for a couple short story projects, as well as some of the nonfiction books that I have, because I also work in the book industry, and I have a podcast. So for my books about the business of writing and publishing, I use my voice because people expect it to be my voice. But for audio, I will hire a narrator for that, and so with my Canadian Werewolf series as example, I have Scott Overton, who is a retired radio personality. So he's got an amazing voice. He's a professional,
Perfect.
and he's also a speculative fiction writer too. He's a great writer too. So I love his science fiction. But so Scott's been the voice of Michael Andrews, who is the main character in the Werewolf series, and I've continually hired Scott to do the Canadian Werewolf books. Now, from a business perspective, I haven't yet made my money back on the investment that I put into it because it's a long-term game for me. I've made my money back on the short stories, and I've hired three different narrators to do my short fiction, depending on the different voices I'm thinking of. And with the shorter fiction, it costs a lot less because it's what, an hour, an hour and a half, or maybe half an hour. So, as
Yeah,
opposed to 8 to 10 hours for a full length novel. And so, but the cost on the books is longer. But I want to again, I don't have a huge sell through on the audiobooks yet, but I know in the long run, if somebody is an audiobook fan like me, I listen to probably half of the reading I do nowadays is audiobooks because I'm such a slow reader. But if I'm walking the dogs or going for a run or doing the dishes, whatever, I can listen to an audiobook while I'm doing something else so I can get more
right.
reading done. And I want that to be available. I want if somebody says, "Hey, this sounds like a great series," oh, I can get it on Audible. Oh, I can get it on Apple. Oh, I can get it on Google or any of the other places where audiobooks, or better yet, even I can get it through my local library since they are available. You know, my books are available through library systems around the world. For me, it's important to make sure that if somebody is interested, like if they're listening to an interview with me and they want to check out my books, I want to make sure that they're available in whatever format they can on whatever platform they can get it. Because, you know, unlike an author like Stephen King, where people will migrate from one platform to another, if the book is only available there, they're not going to migrate for me. They're going to just, if it's on the platform they use, if they're a library reader or if they are only on Kindle or they're only on some other platform, they're not going to move for me. They'll just read it if I happen to be available in that format on that platform.
Right, absolutely. Mark, tell us a bit about the Canadian Werewolf series, and we specifically want to talk about Fear and Longing in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so Canadian Werewolf series was born from a short story that I wrote for an anthology. I saw a market and I said, we want to see the story behind the monster. It was called The Beast Within. And I'd never written a werewolf story before, and I had just visited New York City for the first time. And as I was walking down near Battery Park in the southern tip of Manhattan, I just wondered. I was fascinated with just how many pockets of green space exist in like, you know, world's largest city. It was amazing to me, and I thought, wow, imagine trying to live with the werewolf curse where you have no control, and for 10 days every month you turn into an actual wolf and have to run around on all fours. Um, Imagine what it would be like waking up naked in Battery Park with a bullet hole in your leg and the taste of human blood in your mouth, and having no memory of the night before, and thinking, "Oh my God, what the heck did I do last night?" And I'm butt naked. How am I going to get home? So it was meant to be sort of a humorous sort of look at trying to live with the side effects of being a wolf, but only seeing it from the point of view of the human and how he deals with it. So as I was writing the story, I thought, okay, having grown up on comic books and the Marvel comic books and characters like Daredevil and Wolverine, who had these enhanced senses of smell and hearing, etc. I thought, okay, he's got this wolf blood, therefore, as a human, he also has enhanced abilities. And like me, growing up on Spider-Man comic books, he has a sense of with great power comes great responsibility. So he's not going to not help people who need help while he's trying to get home. And that spun into the novel A Canadian Werewolf in New York, where I thought, let's do the entire day. Whereas the short story was just the morning and how is he going to get home, get some clothes, and get to his early morning appointment. without getting arrested for nudity or whatever that is. And so the full novel takes place between sun up and sundown. So you see him as a human, and you see him interacting and stopping muggings and helping people who need help, and so that's the course of Canadian Werewolf. By the time I got to Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, you've met his ex-girlfriend who's back in his life, and he wants to be with her. She doesn't want to be with him. She just wants to be friends. And so he ends up going to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, to work because he is a writer. You can tell there's a lot of wish fulfillment / based on my own life. He is a meek, mild-mannered, I call him a beta human, but alpha wolf. He's a pushover. He's apologetic. All the things you think about as a stereotypical Canadian living in one of the world's biggest cities in New York, where it's tough and rough and push people out of your way. And so there's this contrast in his personality and what he actually ends up doing. So he ends up, he's sad. He is longing for this woman. He ends up going to Hollywood. His agent sends him there to work on the set of a movie based on one of his books. And in LA, he encounters these nefarious bad guys, kind of partially inspired by the activities that you see in the Purge movies, where these people are dressed in costumes, they're out at night, and they are terrorizing. They're terrorizing racial groups. They're terrorizing anyone who's different, anyone who is different from the norm, as considered the norm by middle-aged white men in America, right? So this is basically this neo-Nazi group terrorizing the night in LA. And so Michael gets involved in them, meets a woman as well, who seems to somehow be tied in with them somehow. So he's not sure if he can trust her or not. And then the two of them end up working to fight this neo-Nazi group and falling in love at the same time. So that's sort of the story of Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. And if you haven't guessed or picked it out, is I do love the play on maybe popular titles that you may be familiar with. So Canadian Werewolf in New York is obviously a riff on the John Landis film Canadian Werewolf in London. Fright Night's Big City, the one coming out in December, is obviously a riff on an old Michael J. Fox film, Bright Lights, Big City. And then Fear and Longing in Los Angeles obviously is a riff on the Hunter S. Thompson book and the movie of the same name, obviously. So hopefully in the titles, people can pick up the fact that this is action adventure, it's paranormal urban fantasy, but there is going to be humor sprinkled throughout the story, because you can't help, I don't know, Michael can't help it, because he's such a nervous pushover Canadian, that in the midst of fighting the bad guys, he can't help but quip and make jokes just to try and make them feel a little bit more comfortable, or maybe even throw the people that he's fighting with. If he can startle them or surprise them, maybe that sets them off their game a little bit.
Oh my goodness. I must admit, personally, I was never into sort of werewolves, but my husband enjoyed that, and I've got 2 sons, so by virtue of my life being filled with men,
Yes.
I knew about these things. And Tish is watching over on Amazon, and she was just agreeing with what you said earlier about just making your books available in different formats.
Yeah.
She says, yes, Mark, nowadays you can go online to the library website and reserve the book or the digital version. So even before it's available, you can make a reservation. And then she says about the werewolves. I remember Michael Landon's movie when he first started out his career.
Yeah, and that was and what I
That
loved about
goes back a little while.
it was the 80s, and I remember it because it was scary, but it was also funny. Right.
Yes,
And
it
I
was.
thought about that. And I've often thought, because I write a lot of scary stories, it's hard to write about weird, bizarre things that we barely understand without, a bit of humor. It's not like that Whistling Past the Graveyard, where you're trying to distract yourself from the ghosts and the monsters. But also it's like, wait a second, there's what? What is happening? How do you not react with a bit of humor it's that, or potentially you go insane. So how does Michael deal with the fact that, he runs around on all fours and howls at the moon and has no memory of what it's like to be a wolf? How does he deal with that? How does he deal with even having how do you have a relationship with someone where you have to mysteriously disappear every night for 10 days? It's like, are you having an affair? No, I'm just running around like a wolf, right? I got to go pee on the side of rocks and howl at the moon. Like, so there's a bit of humor involved. At least the way I approach it, the humor is an important element.
I think, we can't get through life without having a huge element of humor. Just take the pandemic and everything's, you've got to have a sense of humor. And one of the authors that I've interviewed a few times is a theatre sister. And I want to crack myself up interviewing her, because when she's in the theatre, doing surgery on somebody, she imagines all these scenes that she's going to be writing into her next book.
So what's going on in that mind of yours? Well, a
I
friend of
know, and I'm
mine,
like,
yeah, I
you
was
were
going
going
to
to say
say
about a friend of yours?
yeah, a friend of mine who is a horror writer is an anesthesiologist, and he actually wrote one of his novels, Sandman, is about an anesthesiologist who happens to be a serial killer. And I always wondered,
Yeah.
anyone who happened to be a fan of his on the table looking up and seeing him as the guy who's about to put him out, and you're like, oh my god, how does he, well, he's retired now, but that could have been a challenge, right?
I can imagine, you're lying there as a patient, you're thinking, wait a minute, I recognize you from somewhere.
Yeah, I just read
And
your
that's
book
not a
about
good
the,
memory.
yeah, yeah, as you're about to go to sleep.
Oh my goodness. Well, that could be a rude awakening, but but very, very interesting.
Yeah.
You've also done a bunch of anthologies just as an editor, or have you also been in one of the anthologies, or just mainly editing?
Oh, no, I've been like, I've had short stories in countless anthologies. I continue to write short fiction and send them off to markets, but I have edited a number of anthologies. I've done, yeah, I've worked with different publishers, and I've even done a few of them myself. I think the longest series that I've worked on was a Fiction River anthology series from WMG Publishing, um, out of the US. And that is a great it was a workshop series where we would be editors. So I did Feel the Fear, Feel the Love, Superstitious, Editor's Choice. I did with them, and those were all workshopped. Where about 75 writers would be invited into this workshop. That was exclusive. They had to have some credentials as good writers, and we would have 6 editors on stage, and we'd be there for an entire week. And every day, one of the 6 editors would be buying for an anthology, but we would all read all the stories that would have been submitted, and each editor would give their critique of the story, like a 5-minute critique that would say whether or not they would buy it, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. Maybe they didn't even finish reading it, whatever it was, good or bad. There was a lot of, I mean, there was crying that happened, not just the writers being rejected in the audience, but even as an editor, if a story moved me so much that I couldn't talk about it without crying, darn right I was going to want to buy it. Or if it wasn't my anthology, I would
Yeah.
say. But what it teaches writers is, the really, really important lesson is, this same story, the reaction of 6 different editors. You can have like every second editor, they're like, I loved it, I hated it, I couldn't read it, it was dumb, I didn't like this, I love this. The exact same thing. What one person hated, the other person loved. And what it
Yeah.
teaches writers is, it's not necessarily that the story is good or bad, it's that it resonated with an editor. And all that matters, of the 6 of us up there, if 5 people said they would never read it and they rejected it, but the editor who is going to pay you for this, professional rates, which is 6 to 8 cents US per word, that's the only one that counts. Is the one who's
Right.
going to give you money for this story. And so that's, as an editor, it was a great experience, because it's one thing to write a rejection letter to or fill out a form that says not for us, move on. It's quite another thing to be sitting on stage in front of a room full of writers, looking that writer in the eye and saying, I couldn't get past the first paragraph. I just you know, and it could be weird, something weird like, oh, it has a clown in it. I don't read clown stories. Sorry, I'm done. Right? You lost me in the first
Yeah.
word. That
Yeah.
kind of thing. So that's
My
not an
goodness.
easy task. Yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, and I just wanted to show the audience, that's the cover of Mark's book. It's a beautiful cover. Who designed that cover? Do you have a copy close by?
I do. I have a copy of that close by. So the Juan Pedron, who's
Really,
done
I want to
the
put you on. I'm going to put you on full screen so people
okay.
can see that beautiful
I'll
cover.
even so you can kind of
There you
see
go.
the series branding. So the designer is Juan Pedron of Pedron Designs, and he does an absolutely amazing job. He's done all the covers in my series. He's done a little. You can't even see. There's even a texture of the Canadian maple leaf in the words.
I noticed
Yeah.
that. It's gorgeous. It's
Yeah.
absolutely gorgeous.
He's done such a brilliant job. He also Stowe Away is one of the other titles. It's a novella in the series,
Hold on.
and he's
There we
got
go.
that. Yeah, and that's basically about him getting caught on a train on his way to Stowe, Vermont, and he's going to turn into a wolf before it gets to the end. But yeah, Juan Pedron of Pedron Designs has done a brilliant job. He's done obviously the cover for Fright Night's Big City. And Lover's Moon is another novella in the series. So I just sent him a note asking for some tweaks to the covers as they're coming up. But I've just working with him has been an amazing experience, and he's very, very affordable. So if there are other writers out there listening, Juan Pedron Designs, he has pre-built covers that are discounted, where you just go in and give them the title, give them the cover, and I've even bought a half dozen book covers from him just because I love them so much, and I thought, well, I'll just buy them and I'll write the book one day. But for this for this series, he picked the branding. I love the way he did it, and so I think I was in the middle. I wasn't even finished writing Fear and Longing in Los Angeles when I knew what was going to happen in Fright Night's Big City. So I kind of knew the premise, came up with the title, and midway through writing that previous book, I emailed him and said, Juan, I need this book cover because I wanted. I even put it up for pre-order because it was like I
Well,
was just adamant. But and he turns things around so quickly too.
oh, that's awesome. So I wanted to ask you, at what point do you come up with the title? I'm always fascinated because some authors, they just start writing and they decide the title towards the end, towards the middle. When does it happen for you?
It happens all over the place. Sometimes the title comes first. In the case of Fright Night's Big City, I knew the premise. These horrible bad guys come and sort of take over New York City and turn it into a fear city sort of situation. And so I knew the title for that one right away. Fear. Yeah, I think I might have known the titles relatively early. Stow Away took a while longer. I think I had written half the novella before I came up with it. But in some cases, the title comes first. In other times, I know, for example, I know Lover's Moon. Juan did the cover for me ages ago, and I'm actually co-authoring that with a friend of mine because it's going to get more into the romance aspects of the story of Michael and this ex-girlfriend of his and how they first met. But we were even talking about what happens in the next book, and we have a feeling for it, but I have no idea what the title is going to be. And I think it'll come from obviously what's going to happen in the book. But then the other thing I did, and I did this with Fright Night's Big City, is I had the premise, I knew what was going to happen, and then I started looking at novels and movies that had city in the title to come up with my riff, where I'm going to tweak one of the words or change one of the words. For me, there's something fun about the familiarity, going like, wait a second. Isn't that the Hunter S? No, it's not the Hunter S. Thompson, because that's Vegas, not Los Angeles. And that to me is part of the fun, is that it's somewhat familiar, but a little bit different. Almost like I'm a huge fan of Weird Al Yankovic and the parody songs he does. So that little twist, that little parody element is an important aspect of at least this series for me.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, can I ask you, would you mind reading us a short, maybe just a paragraph out of Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, just to give us a taste of of the book. So we'll
Yeah,
take
yeah.
we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, you can just give us a brief taste of the book.
Sounds good. All right, this is the prologue for the Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. Prologue: I see a full moon rising. I see trouble on the way. Michael Andrews shuddered at the words of the flight attendant on the overhead speaker because it meant he was trapped on the plane with no way to escape. Please be advised that we will be delayed for another hour while we wait for ATC clearance on a revised schedule and where we can fit into the takeoff queue. This is a reminder to remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. We also remind you that all of your larger electronic personal devices should be stored in the overhead bins or under the seat in front of you. Your smaller devices, which you can store in the seat pockets in front of you, should be set to airplane mode. He shifted uncomfortably, feeling the hot beads of sweat pouring down his forehead and his shirt soaking up the clamminess of his back. No, this wasn't possible. It couldn't be happening. He knew that he should have gotten off the plane earlier during the first flight delay, when they were still parked at the gate and hadn't closed the doors. But the first delay was only 15 minutes, waiting for a crew member who was late via a delayed connecting flight. The second, while they were still at the gate waiting for air traffic control clearance, was only another half hour. The third delay, which they didn't specify, was another 40 minutes. But this latest delay, an additional hour, this was pushing it too far. He glanced out the window at the sun as it was making its way slowly towards the hills of the western sky. It was still hours away from touching down, but that was sunset in Los Angeles. This plane was traveling east. The sun would most certainly set after he was in the air. Back in New York, which was 3 hours ahead, it would be nightfall. The nightfall of a full moon. Okay, not the full moon yet, but one that would be well more than 3/4 full. And he had absolutely no control over the change. In the many years since his lycanthropic affliction, he never had control. During the cycle of the full moon, his body morphed completely from human form into the full four-legged form of a wolf whenever the moon was at least 80% full. He turned to his companion, looked deep into her light blue eyes. She stared back at him, placed her hand comfortingly on top of his. "This isn't good," he whispered.
Awesome. Awesome.
Kind of
Wow,
sets the
that's
scene.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Guys, if you are watching us over on Amazon Live, that book is in the carousel. Go and grab a copy of the book. Mark, lastly, I want to ask you, so you've been in the industry for a really, really long time. What is your advice on marketing? Because a lot of people, new authors, entrance
Yeah,
into the market, the premise is always, I've written this book, it's
right.
out there, it's going to fly off the shelves by itself. But in reality, that doesn't quite happen.
No, it doesn't.
What's your marketing advice? And would you advise people to get a publicist? Yes, no? What's your sense on that?
So I think you can't begin marketing until you really truly understand a couple key things. Your book is not for everyone. I know my books are not for everyone. People are going to hear that. Some people are going to hear that intro and go, "Oh, this sounds great. I love the idea of a werewolf and stuff like that." Other people are going to go, not for me." That's fine. You want to focus on the people who are going to like it. So the first thing you need to understand before you do marketing is pay attention to what I call comp titles. That's an industry term. Comp authors, comp titles. These would be titles that people are similar. So what kind of books would people have read prior to reading my book that they've enjoyed? I've read this, I like that. What TV shows, etc. I even have a Venn diagram that I've used, whether I'm pitching to a publisher or whether it's something I want to use for my own marketing, that says, these are the kinds of people who would like this book. There's a group here that kind of like this. There's a group here that like that. There's a group here that like that. And right where the cross section happens, that's your ideal audience. And you want to focus all your marketing efforts on them. Where are they hanging out? How can you get in touch with them? And how can you engage and interact with them? Not sell to them, but be part of the communities. And that's a really, really hard thing for authors to think about, because authors want to sell. They want to sell their book. They want to get their book sold. No, what you need to do is you need to engage people. You need to interact with them. You need them to be excited about the book, because my best marketing happens when somebody picks up my book or one of my books and loves it so much that they tell other people. Because still, amongst all of the tools that are available, one of the best modes of marketing is word of mouth. People tend to read and buy things from people they know, like, and trust, and their friends are amongst them. So with a publicist as well, your publicist, like an editor, you've got to find one that works with you really, really well. I work with Mickey from Creative Edge Publishing, publicist, for example, and we have a great working relationship, just like I have a great working relationship with my editors. So if you're going to work with a publicist, make sure it's someone that you kind of see eye to eye with, and you kind of understand, how they can fulfill you, how you can fulfill them, and how you can work together as a team. And teamwork in marketing is the same thing. What is my book going to do to help make your day better? If it's escape that you're looking for in fiction, or if it's nonfiction, how is it going to inform, entertain, or inspire you? Those are the key questions before you even get into tactics about marketing.
And Tish is agreeing. She says, I wholeheartedly believe with the engagement concept. And, everything is about people.
Yeah.
I was laughing as I watched something the other day. I think it was on LinkedIn, and someone said, enough already about this business to business and B2C, and how about just keeping it human to human? Because that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
It doesn't matter what the service, the product. You're not selling to a business, because that business is represented by a human. And unless that human likes you, it's not going to happen,
Exactly. No, exactly. It just comes down to somebody is going to be and I know it sounds harsh to say this, but somebody is going to be a consumer of this product. As much as we're passionate about stories, they're a consumer, and all that they're interested in is, how is this going to make my day better? How is this going to help me? They're not interested in what they're going to buy. They're interested in, what is the side effect of me drinking this, eating this, reading this, watching this, whatever. And that's what we have to think about.
How does it make me feel? How does it make me feel, or what problem does it solve for me? Whether it's, in the case of reading, it's going to solve my problem of wanting something that's going to fulfill me or entertain me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we need to think about with Mark, as opposed to, how am I going to sell 50 copies of this today? No. How is this book? Who is this book going to help? Who's this book? Whose lives is it going to change and enrich in whatever way that happens?
Absolutely. Mark, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming onto the show with us today. Thank you to our audience who's joined us. Do you have one tip for a new author?
One tip for a new author is, if you are passionate about storytelling, do not give up on yourself. We've never had more opportunity than ever before in the history of writing and publishing. Stick to your guns, butt in chair, fingers on keyboard, continue to write, and don't give up on yourself. Because there's probably a reader out there that's going to love your stuff, but you have to finish writing it, and it has to be out there in the world for them to enjoy it first.
Awesome. Mark, thank you very much. Thank you very much for those of you who have joined us on Amazon Live, on Facebook, on YouTube, over on Twitter. It's been amazing. Thank you very much. Tish says, yes, this has been terrific.
Thanks, Tish.
She's really enjoyed that. Take care, everyone. We'll see you back on the next episode of Books with Bridgetti. Stay safe.